to changes in culture, which leads to changes in how you talk to your customers. I also work with a lot of startups and such. I'm involved in a couple social ventures myself, one being an organization in Chicago called EAT, which is Education, Agriculture, and Technology, how we apply technology to help educate children about agriculture, healthy eating, and then how that also branches out towards strategic investments across ag tech, and mostly urban agriculture technology, sustainable farming. And then also toilet hackers. Go to toilethackers.org and see what we're doing. But our goal is to raise enough money to put 10 million new toilets in developing countries, because we understand that if we can solve the world sanitation problem, we create new markets, which then is good for business. So I'm going to talk to you about Google Glass specifically, but also a couple of other technologies that are emerging today, which could either be used in your solutions that you come up with, or as an impetus to help you understand how you can design and create your own solutions to the problems that you encounter every day. That's kind of one of the fire starters in the world of startups, right? And when I think of innovation, what innovation to me means, and to the work I do with my clients, it's really about understanding the unmet needs that people have and how do we solve those unmet needs. A little bit just about our company. We're called Isobar. In the US, we're called Round Arch Isobar. The reason being is that we've grown through acquisition, and the strategy until today is just to tack our old name onto Isobar as our last name, if you will. That'll probably change at some point. But we're global. We've got about 3,000 people, 600 or so experienced designers, 200 or so mobile developers, and a lot of other technologists and such. Really quickly, what we do, so you get an understanding of the context of what I'm going to talk to you about. So we help Tesla Motors think through the in-car screen experience for the Model S show car. Great job that they've done this year. Probably made the highest rated car ever. We work with Adidas regularly to design and develop the experience of wearable sensors and the software to report back. This is being used by Major League Soccer. It's called My Coach Elite. It's also referred to as team systems, but we put sensors on all the players, and the coaches have real-time performance data. And we're also socializing some of that data to the cloud so that fans can participate and follow their favorite players, and if their energy levels are dropping, they can cheer louder to boost them up. Healthways is a company that some of you may be aware of. They provide health and wellness services to corporations who are looking to have healthier workforces. We're their digital agency of record. We produce a lot of behavior modification programs for them. One which is extremely successful, and I'm assuming that some of you have heard of Blue Zones, which is a carryover from some academic research. And Healthways is launching this across the country to create areas where there are specific aspects of human behavior that lead to a healthier, happier society. And back to your talk, one thing I believe strongly in is happiness. When we design software, we want to make the users happy. It sounds kind of crazy, because it used to be about making things efficient and optimizing processes and the bottom line. And we understand that if we have happy people, they work better, and software shouldn't have to be painful for people to use. HBO is a client I work on a lot. We provide insight and digital design expertise across all their digital platforms. We mentioned MIT Media Lab a moment ago. We sponsor the Media Lab, and we collaborate with them kind of on the future of what experiences mean. And that all leads to the fact that we have an understanding that connected devices are now ubiquitous. Who has a cell phone? Whose cell phone can get on the internet? Rewind 5 years ago and ask that question. And because of connected devices, the obvious ones, computers and phones and things, we see moving towards this trend of the Internet of Everything. We used to call it the Internet of Things, but it is essentially everything. And that's connecting the unconnected. So, when we look at specific technologies that are emerging right now, which really play probably into some of the innovations that you're thinking about. Smartwatches, fairly interesting. The problem with these watches is that it's really hard to use that as a screen to do data input. So that's where we start to think about things like voice input and voice control. And we'll see some of that demoed in Google Glass. It's getting much more sophisticated. But I would think that in 2 years, computers on your wrist will be a very commonplace thing, just as a smartphone in your pocket is today. And we know that every major manufacturer out there, along with about 50 startups, are all trying to tackle that problem. Glasses and facial wearables. So we talk about Google Glass because Google is Google and they get tons of marketing. There's also a thing that came out recently, not necessarily a mobility-focused glass, but the Oculus Rift. Go Google that term and watch a fascinating video of a 90-year-old woman whose grandson puts the glasses on her and she takes a virtual tour of Venice, and you've never seen such delight. She is completely blown away by the experience, and it opens up a lot of opportunities for data visualization, as well as experiences for wellness. Imagine the implications of applying some sort of immersive experience like that to people who are in pain, for learning and education, for autistic folks. The list goes on for the potential opportunities. And it's all very emerging. Then there's this Recon Instruments has a thing called JET. Recon Instruments is a company that makes the heads-up displays inside Oakley ski goggles. They have released, or will be releasing this fall for $500, a pair of glasses that's fully open source and you can develop your own apps. It's far less restricted than what Google is doing with Glass. And then lastly is this idea of gesture control, new ways of input, and we call that natural human interfaces. But this idea that Leap Motion, which you've probably heard of if you kind of follow tech, is a little teeny box that you can plug into your computer, and then, like Minority Report, you just use hand gestures to control things. They're launching that product now, and it's being licensed out to device makers, so it'll be incorporated into TVs and laptops and appliances and things of that nature. And then another really interesting thing is a small startup that got funded on Kickstarter called Thalmic Labs has a thing called the Mayo, and this is fascinating because it's an armband that does two things. One, it has sensors in it, like accelerometers, that can tell motion and where my arm is positioned and how my arm is positioned, but it also reads the muscles in my arm, which we know there are a lot of. You guys probably know that better than I do. That I can snap my fingers and it can record a snap, it can record a point, 2 fingers, any kind of gesture. You combine that kind of technology along with your mobile device that has a GPS, and this armband that you wear all day starts to control different things based on where you are. So if you're in an operating room, this armband could control all of the robotic equipment in the room. If you're at home, it could control your stereo or your lights. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. If we look at some projections, so this is about invention, right? We're talking about devices, and we're not talking about traditional medical devices. We're talking about low-cost consumer devices, and there's this thought that we've had over the last couple of years around the consumerization of the enterprise. Because it started, right, when people started bringing their iPhones to work and insisting that they be able to use their work applications on their iPhone, and now CTOs across the country are forced into thinking about, oh my gosh, the technology that people have at home has surpassed our technology within our organization, and our users are demanding they have it, and it goes back to what we were saying about making people happy. It's a better experience, and so companies need to adopt it, and they have, and that also includes medical institutions. So if we look at wearable health-related devices, and this is more like heart monitors, temperature sensors, flex and motion sensors, things that can be employed to understand how a person moves in their behaviors. By 2016, you're looking at about 100 million device sales annually. And then if you look at the smaller segment of the market, which is sports and fitness related devices, and you see a bunch of these from the Fitbit to Nike, to what we do with Adidas, about 80 million per year. So there's a huge market ahead of us. We won't have the discussion on silicon waste, but we understand that there's a lot happening in the space, and devices are getting cheaper and smaller and faster and connected, and it's all very exciting if you can figure out how to plug them together and do something with that information. Connected health monitoring is the last part of this, and this kind of goes with the work we've done with Healthways around scales, blood pressure monitors, pill dispensers, so you can get an idea of what your patients are doing when you're not with your patients. And you're not going to be able to do a full inspection, but at least you can understand their life patterns and do those align with what they should be doing. And if not, then we get into this idea of feedback loops. So I think this is extremely powerful, and this is not a new concept, but we're able to encourage or discourage behaviors, and this is around behavior modification, through, that we once thought were unchangeable, right? Smoking is an example, weight loss obviously is an example to reduce diabetes. Well-designed feedback changes behavior. Well, the problem we've had until this date, there's no way to understand the behavior. So I can't provide feedback to what you're doing because I don't know what you're doing. But now that you have mobile phones and that you have all these other potential sensors connected to you or in your world, we can provide feedback. So if you look at the scenario we always talk about when we talk about feedback loops, it's speed traps. Speed traps don't work as well as putting up the sign that tells you your speed. And that's a feedback loop. I'm going too fast, it shows that I'm going too fast, and I subconsciously slow down. I'm not in trouble, it was a nice tip to keep me safe. Now when we apply feedback loops to person's emotions, which is what these folks have done, which I think is great, Elm Grove, they've taken the speed sign and they've tacked additional emotional response to it by saying your accident bills could be 42 miles per hour or $1,000, or you're going to spend 46 days in the hospital because you went too fast. And now your speed is tied to some sort of ramification, whether it be financial or it be, I'm standing in the hospital for 46 days, I don't know if that's what I want to do. So it's a very interesting time because now we're able to capture data and do something with it. So let's talk about glass. My colleague, Mike DiGiovanni, who you see here, has in the last 2 months been on CNN, CNET, In Fast Company, the BBC, Engadget, ABC News, because we started writing code for Google Glass the day that we got our hands on one. And the first thing that Mike did was create an application called Winky. Now, it allows you to take, and you've probably read the articles, and people have a lot of misconceptions about Glass, but you can spy on people with Google Glass because you can take a picture with a wink. Well, the intention for us was not to take a picture with a wink. The intention for us was to explore this device and understand how it's made and what it can do, and what if you could trigger actions on a device with just using a wink gesture because I didn't have my hands busy. I'm performing a surgery. I need to stop recording now. Do I lift my hand up? Do I touch this? Or do I just wink my eye? And can I control the device? So we've been very active with Google Glass in terms of development. How many here are technical? Okay, so I'll go really quickly into this. There's 2 types of apps for Google Glass. Google wants you to write glassware applications. If you think of what glassware is, there is a thing called the Google Mirror API. You build your own web application, and through this Mirror API, I subscribe to updates from this web application of some sort. An example would be New York Times news pushes. I subscribe to, I want New York Times on my glass, and then when there's a news alert, New York Times pushes this to the Mirror API, and the Mirror API pushes it down to my device. The second, we're probably more familiar with, the second approach, which isn't officially supported by Google, but they've open sourced the software so that people can start building native applications, just like we have in the past, iPhone apps and Android apps and tablet apps, and building regular software that runs on the device. That's not Google's preference right now, and that's not necessarily the direction they're heading. They are really talking more about smart glass applications. So a little philosophy on glass, quickly. We've gone in the age of computing to, and you guys can attest to this if you've worked in technology, somebody comes to visit your office, you used to show them the server room and go, look at all the computers we have. Look at all the data on this screen. It's amazing. And now I walk in and I show somebody a Raspberry Pi computer and I go, look at this computer, it's this big. And so information has traveled from our left to our right, where we had lots of information because that's what we thought we needed, and to information designed for a specific form factor. We got smaller, we got more efficient. We went to tablets and smartphones, and now we move into things like glass or wearable computers, where I don't need to know the precipitation next week at 2 p.m. I want to know, is it going to be sunny or not? Because that's what I really care about when I'm a mobile person. The details I can get into later. And so with all of the technologies that we have in place right now, I won't go into big data, but this idea that I can easily query mounds and mounds and mounds of information and surface what's relevant to me in context to what I'm doing at that specific time is a reason I think that glass and these wearable devices will see a nice future in terms of integrating into our culture as a way to access information. Google's doing a couple other things that you see materialize in glass that you don't need glass for, but you can get an idea of how these are really important. So Google Now is an app that you can install if you install the Google app on your phones, where it takes information from your Gmail inbox, your calendar appointments, your location, and it dishes up these little teeny cards to you. So you wake up, you look at your phone, and it tells you 12 minutes to work with no traffic. There's 2 restaurants near you. You have an appointment at 4 o'clock. It's going to rain later. Wear a raincoat, whatever. So it's what you need to know right now. It's contextual information brought to you by Google. The second is conversational search. Super cool. So natural language processing, voice recognition. We've heard these things, we've experimented with them in the past, and we've generally been frustrated by them. Conversational search allows you to talk to Google. So there's 2 pieces. One, it's conversational. So I can say, and I'll show you on glass, when did the Eiffel Tower get built? And it tells me, it doesn't show me a list of results that I can click on to find out. It just tells me when the Eiffel Tower was built. And then I can follow up with a search question that says, who built it? And it understands the context of my last question to apply it towards my next question. That becomes super powerful when you start talking about getting rid of big screens and being able to talk to computers and technology. Imagine being able to walk into a patient's room and ask for a medical record, or what has this person's blood pressure been for the last 24 hours? And it just shows up here. So I'm able to talk to systems. And then the last part is Hangouts, and we've seen this Raphael Grossman. He's a physician. He's kind of like an innovative doctor. He's been using Hangouts to do education on surgeries, where he's using glass. He's part of the Explorer program, and he's using it to stream the surgical procedures to students. Pretty interesting. So glass, as you've seen it, it's the one device I've seen come onto the market, which it's not even publicly for sale yet. And there's been a million articles written about it, and everyone is kind of wrong. I thought I understood Google Glass because I'm like a techie and I was following it, and I'm meeting with clients and I'm like, we can do this, and this is how it will be. And then I got them and I wore them, and I realized that I was dead wrong with what they were and what the intention was and how they best serve a person. Glass is not for marketing and advertising like smartphones and search. Someday that might happen, but it's not about promoting a brand to somebody, because if you did that, it just becomes too noisy and messy and it doesn't become usable anymore. Glass is not intended for augmented reality, although a lot of us wish it were. Like, you could see the world out there and see data points plotted on it. It doesn't do that. Through a native application, you could make it do that, but it's not the intention of the device. The hardware and software are constantly evolving, and this is one of the cool things. As we talk to the panel here, and we hear about iterative development and this idea of failing early and kind of jumping into things and testing, Google's approach has been to listen to the community, and every month they push out a new release to the device, which is absolutely better than the one before. Battery life increases, they put a web browser in place, voice recognition picked up, Bluetooth got stronger. They're listening and they're actively developing, and that's why I believe that when it does become a commercial product, it's going to be quite successful, because they're listening and taking this very visible approach to what you need to do in today's day and age to meet the changes that are happening around the launch of a product in the society that you're trying to bring it to. Glass experiences are very lightweight, which seems obvious. And the last is that it's a very personal device. And I've known this because one of the things, and some folks yesterday who got to try them on and play with them, it's very hard to get it in 5 minutes. Because you look at it and you're like, okay, but what happens is when you go back to the hotel and it's 6 p.m. and it's like, ding, hey, you want to go find some place to walk to get dinner? And I'm wearing glasses, and I thought, oh, that's great. And I take a walk and I take some pictures and I share those pictures, and friends write back. And now I'm talking to friends that live in Indianapolis that are like, what are you doing in Indianapolis? Because they saw the posts I made, and I can respond with my voice, and it's kind of like having a little magic genie follow me around that can communicate for me. So if we talk about the hardware, and I'm charging this one up, the band is made out of titanium, and it's important to know that this design, this is a prototype. Google apparently is working with a company called Warby Parker, which is an eyeglass manufacturer, kind of like the Zappos is for shoes, Warby Parker is for glasses. I don't have glasses, but I assume if I did, I'd buy my glasses from them. It came out of a project at Georgia Tech where one of the guys that leads a research group there wanted a device for taking notes, and so he started creating this. And I think there's other stabs at a technology like this in the past. Where this is cool is that it uses this prism display. So if you look on the left here, it's that little piece of glass. Looks like a sugar cube. The picture actually shoots out of the side and it hits a 45-degree angle and it projects it not into your eye, but essentially it looks like there's a Jumbotron scoreboard kind of sitting out there that you can move your head, it kind of follows your eye and it sits above your eye. It's also important to understand how you get apps, because you don't install apps on glass like you would a phone. You go to this glass portal website. So in the world, I would find somebody online that says, hey, I have a glass app, click here to install it. I install it, it takes me to a little authentication box that says, can this thing access your Google Mirror API? I click yes, and then it adds it to here. So some of the things I have enabled are Evernote, Facebook, the CNN breaking news, Twitter. I don't have Twitter enabled because it's just too much all the time. And then some experimental apps, which I'll show you a couple of. And so with that, I think we should take a look at it. So here's the device. I've been charging it. And one of the things to note, you see it on the internet, most of the pictures are of the guy like this, wearing, oh hey, eyeglass. So it also has eyeglass snap-ins, which make the thing a little more discreet, which I'm not going to wear in here, but it's a good thing to know because people are like, well, they're not really glasses. But if I put those on, it becomes harder to tell that I'm wearing a computer on my face because I actually have lenses. And I actually have been wearing these a lot. So with the device on, here's the, and I have to avoid saying the G word because it's going to flip into, are we still connected? Let me see, let me walk back here. Can you take a look at that? Is it moving? Okay. Turn it sideways for the screen fast. Oh no. Go up to devices. Hang on 1 second. It's not a very good demo if you don't get to see it. We also have to understand it's relatively new technology. So. Okay. Let me get that real quick. I'll take this with me. Can you bring that down? We're going to disconnect that screen real quick and get it running. And I assume you can still hear me if I go back here and talk. So glass runs off this idea of a timeline. When you look at that OK glass screen, imagine that's your start screen. It's here. And as you swipe left and right, you can move to the right of it. Is that your right? That's your left. To the left of it or to the right of it. Turn it off. Anything you want to say?
It is a computer.
It is a computer. It is a computer. And you know, oddly enough, I've never actually had any connectivity problems with it until I got in this room. That's true. That is actually true. Okay. So as this thing starts up. So if you imagine the timeline of cards, this is my OK Glass screen. And on that screen, I can say, OK Glass, and then it takes me to the next menu. And on the next menu, I can do things like take a picture, record a video, send a message, make a phone call, find directions to something. I think that's it right now. From that menu, if I go back up, I look at the OK Glass menu. Okay, we got a pairing request. My time wasting is almost over. Oh, here we go. So these cards, if you imagine a timeline left and right, okay, glass is in the middle. To the left of it are things that you pin to your timeline. They're applications or data that you want access to frequently. So if I do a search for how do I get to the airport from here, when I look to the left, as long as I'm still doing that navigation, the navigation instructions are always kind of right there, very easy to access. The right-hand side of Google Glass, of its timeline, is all about things that are happening in real time. So new cards get pushed in as I get an email, as someone sends me a message, as I take a picture, and that's kind of like my living timeline going right to left. All right, we're gonna almost back up. Weird. Does it look weird when I'm looking at it? Can you tell? Yeah. So I think you made the comment yesterday. I mean, it does remind me of the jerk. The other problem could be, here we go. Okay. Can you plug that guy back in? All right. I might just have to stand down here. Yeah, but when you look at it, right, we all end up kind of cross-eyed. You want to do a countdown? 5, 4. Oh, we're going to have video in 2 seconds.
What does it feel like to you when you switch your vision between peripheral and...
You know, I mean, and I'll let you guys, so it's, the way to explain it is, like if I'm looking at you right now, I don't even see it. I know I've got something on my head, right? If I just look up, I mean, it literally is.
Right, but then you don't see me because your attention is focused on your peripheral vision.
It is.
And your eyes have to switch between peripheral and central.
It's pretty quick. I mean, I can.
For me, that results in a headache within 10 minutes.
Yeah, and you know, when they tell us when we pick up the device, okay, hey, look at that. Okay, so let's.
Use up your time so you don't go forward, but you go forward with your thing.
So let's show a couple examples. First, we'll do I'll show you the kind of cards that we were talking about just to get an idea. So we're in the middle, and if I swipe forward, we start to see here's an email I got, here's another email I got, here's another email I got. Here's a video I took earlier when we were testing. Some pictures, and so like let's say I took this picture and I want to share it. I just tap, and I hit share, and then I can decide who I want to share it to, and we'll share this to Facebook just for fun. Okay.
How do you hit share?
I'm sorry?
How do you hit share? How do you activate that function?
The sharing. So for each, yeah, tapping on the side. So on the side of the glass here acts almost as a mouse trackpad. And so the options are, if I go forward, I move forward through the timeline. And these are news articles that are coming in. Right? This is an email from my painter who is asking if I have a ladder that he can use. If I go backwards on this, so let's say I tapped into something. Now I'm looking at this article, and the CNN application has the blurb of the article as well as a video of the article. So technically, I should be able to load this video up. So it looks a little smoother in here. The way that I get audio is through bone conduction. So right on the back here is a little knob that basically is resting on the bone behind my ear, and it's rattling my skull, which is very strange. There's word on the street that Google's working on a set of earpieces for these of some dudes, because this doesn't work really well outside or if you're in an air conditioning unit or in a noisy environment. If you plug your other ear, it becomes a lot loud. You plug both of them, it becomes very strange because it's like in your head. Meaning, not by all the time. So the device does not record by itself. In order to, so we'll go back to the OK Glass menu. I'll give a little example. So I can tap into this menu, and then I can scroll through, taking a picture, recording a video. And so we'll record a video, and then another tap starts me recording. It defaults to 10 seconds. So if the course of this, I want to make this video longer, I just tap it, and I tap it again to extend the video, and now it'll record until I stop it. So it's a little weird because, yes, I could wear it up and be talking to you, but I kind of have this impression after wearing them around, like if I'm going to have a conversation with you, I generally am going to do that, right? Because then it's more personal and you don't like see me doing that.
Like CNN articles and other things.
Yes.
So it looks, does it connect to something in your phone that tells you what you're looking at, so it gives you the kind of information you want?
Yeah, so
Predetermined.
this is so those are predetermined coming from, because I subscribe to the CNN app, and then the CNN app, based on whatever logic they have, is pushing these updates to me, and then they show up here. The device itself does not have a cell radio in it, so it's required to have either Bluetooth tethering through my cell phone, or I can set up a Wi-Fi network on my cell phone, and then that passes the Wi-Fi settings to this. So if I already have my home Wi-Fi network set up, I come home, I don't have my phone on, this will still attach to the Wi-Fi. So let's look at a couple of the voice commands. So, okay, Glass, take a picture. And then from there, I could say an additional okay, Glass, then share this. We'll do this again. So one tap, okay, Glass, Google, when was President Obama born? So it was telling me, it actually read that to me, which you couldn't hear. And then I can go through and I can look at more information about him, previous office, and so it's making some assumptions of the data I want. And if you apply that to business and healthcare, that becomes pretty interesting because I can look up a patient record and all of a sudden, this is what you asked me for, but I know what's coming next. So it's just gonna start feeding information in. This is pretty cool. So this is a new feature they released. If I tap it once, I can read it out loud, which I wonder if I can speed it down, but we'll give it a shot.
Barack Hussein Obama, too, is the 44th and current president of the United States, the first African American to hold office.
All right, so you can hear what I'm hearing. This is cool. So you read aloud, but I can now view the website. So if I tap this, it's going to load up a web browser of Wikipedia.
Sorry, is this running on Wi-Fi only, or is it 3G in these glasses yet?
There's no 3G in the glass, so if you want it for internet connectivity, it'll run over Wi-Fi, or it'll do Bluetooth tethering through my phone. So here's Wikipedia, and I can run my finger forward to scroll down. I should look at how slow this is. And move my finger back up to scroll up. This is pretty cool. So if I put 2 fingers on it, now you see this view. If I look down, I can scan a web page just by looking around it. I don't know if we can see that well up here. Right, so as I'm essentially looking around the page. And then to click a link, we're just gonna hover over a link for a second. Okay, and I tap it one time, and then I can select that link. And then that loads up. So that's how you navigate. Now, it's a little clunky, and going back to the point, it's a very personal, real-time kind of device. It's not intended to sit down and fill out medical records, right? It's not intended to fill out forms, and the applications are not what we think of as typical web apps, where I do something, I submit it to the server, it gives me a response, I get some data, I do it again. Please.
We're seeing a little bit of a delay.
Yeah.
Is that the glasses or is that the...
That is due to, I'm going over Bluetooth to that. And there's an emulator on the phone. It's one of the devices that is almost impossible to plug into a screen, right? So we experimented with a couple things, and this is probably the fastest way. Inside the device itself, there's 0 delay. One other quick thing I just wanted to show. So we talk about applications for glass. I don't know. Maybe it does make sense to think of Google Glass as the future of how we become really mobile in our working environment. But at the same time, it could be a different device. Well, people have taken a couple stabs here. MedRef, very rough proof of concept application. But if I tap this and I say set patient, John Smith. Okay, so it's going to add John Smith to my patient database. I could also take a picture of someone, send it to MedRef with a name, and now it knows their face. So the next time I see that person, I take a picture, it looks them up and says, hey, that's John Smith. So now if I go into MedRef, so I look at John Smith, oops, sorry. Let's see, my John Smith patient. Oh, you know what? It hasn't replied back to me yet. Again, prototype software. What it would do is it would say, new patient, and then I could say, I'm going to record patient notes. I talk, it records them, and it adds it to John Smith's patient record. The idea is you do this 50 times. I take a picture of John Smith. John Smith's entire patient background comes up in glass. Another kind of fun little application that someone built, which I can use, is this glass fit. So I'll give you a quick example here, and this is more around wellness. So I'm going to choose a beginner workout. And then if I go up here, it'll actually provide, I'm waiting for it to push information back to me. It provides, we're going to start with a warm-up, you do 15 squats. So you do them, but there's an accelerometer in here, so it's counting for me. And it knows that I did the 15, I can't lie to it. And it times me. And you go all the way through beginner to intermediate to more advanced to expert workouts, right, using the device, and the device is measuring. The difference between that and the other stuff that we have is that it's very real time. It's almost as if this thing knows, right? And it's, again, if I have real knowledge about behavior, then I can do behavior modification through feedback loops and other things, as well as providing that data back up to make a holistic picture of someone's behavior, especially patients, right? So I was joking around, but I think it's actually a great idea for a diet application to use your GPS, because if I take my 3-year-old son to go buy ice cream, it knows I'm sitting at an ice cream place, and it looks up their menu and it tells me that I should order the frozen yogurt opposed to the ice cream, because it will keep me on my plan. And those kind of, but that's all it does, right? It's just a reminder.
But when he said that, I went, oh no. That's just spooky.
Yeah, so really quickly, here's the Glass Fit application. If you guys want to check some of these things out, Google Glass Fit, MedRef. And then the last thing I wanted to say, because I came across this guy doing research, I'm assuming some of you have seen his stuff. I don't know if he's a good doctor or not, but Raphael Grossman, this is a pretty fascinating idea of building a native application for CPR. So I notice someone laying on the floor, I start the application, it locates the nearest hospital, it dials 911, and it starts to play Staying Alive so I can do it on beat, right? And the right amount of compressions with the right rhythm. So what that leads me to, as we go into a conversation here, it's not about glass. All those other devices that we talked about, if any of you have ever gone to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, this year, it was, a building as big as this entire space full of new medical devices, consumer medical devices. And these things are being created from the HAPA fork, which is a sensor-based fork that ties to your diet plan that vibrates when you eat too fast, so you know that you're taking too many bites, to a zillion different scales and blood pressure monitors. All of these devices where 10 years ago, we would have to have a big behemoth invest in the R&D to create these things. Now, through the maker movement and through hackathons and these venture and organizational sponsored contests for innovation, and through things like Arduino and the fact that, this weekend, someone's probably going to sit down and build something that could be materialized into a real product. You could build a prototype in 2 days. Instead of investing $500,000, you could invest $50,000 and flesh something out and then take it to China for manufacturing. It's a really exciting time. So it's not just about, hey, could we use Google Glass inside of healthcare? It's how can we follow a model kind of like this? Because this started with a guy at Georgia Tech who wanted to take notes better. And where real ideas come from, and you had mentioned it in your keynote, was you get guys like me, like I work across all these different industries, and what I'm probably pretty good at is tell us your problems and let us help solve those problems by applying what we know from everything else about people. But what I don't know is your problems. And as you go through your day-to-day, I mean, I do this all the time. Like, I wish this could be better. I want to write a note about it. I was riding my bike the other day, and I thought, what if I had a rear view mirror? Couldn't I take this app and build a rear-facing camera? So a little clip for my bike seat, I stick my phone in, that's looking backwards with the camera, and it's displaying it in the Google Glass so I can see behind me as I ride my bike. Because I live in Chicago, and you know what biking is like on the streets of Chicago. You can run over easily, which isn't actually very funny. But it's about innovating and using these as an example of an innovation. Now the next step happens. How do we use it? Because it's almost a solution looking for a problem, right? Like, and you look at 4K TVs is the same way. Like, I went to this computer electronics show, I see a 4K TV, and I think, it looks nice, but I don't think I have a problem with the way my TV at home looks already, right? And a lot of people think, well, we just employed iPads for the whole hospital. Like, now you're talking about something new. Like, the board's never gonna go for that. It's a cash outlay. We have to support these things. You do. But you also have risk turning into a Kodak or another company that failed to recognize that the ecosystems around you are changing. You need to at least embrace the change to some degree, otherwise you get so far along. I mean, how many times has anybody here said, well, we want to make this change, and they say, oh, the systems are 25 years old, and if we touch them, they're going to crumble apart, it's too risky. So, okay, so you just leave them go forever and you never get better? So it's kind of a challenge to, innovation can be stimulated greatly by your own experiences. So as you go through your day-to-day, decide how you think you want things to be better. Take notes, share them with each other. I mean, I'm telling you, again, yesterday, what we saw at the race car factory was, I expected like 10 booths. There was like 60 booths, people with great ideas across all different industries. And if that is any indication, I always figure like 20% of it actually comes out of these things, of what's happening in Indiana and Indianapolis. There's no reason that this can't be a central hub for innovation in healthcare. It doesn't need to happen in Silicon Valley. It doesn't need to happen in Boston or Austin, right? When we're doing it in Chicago, and if I personally believe that in the Midwest, there's an extremely strong talent of people, or pool of people. There's investors, there's large companies, and if we all put our heads together and start to collaborate and realize that the more we do, the better it will be for all of us involved,
He's drinking the Kool-Aid.
A little bit.
He's totally drinking the Kool-Aid. So we were hoping that we would have some time with Dave to do some brainstorming around his experiences using Google Glass and all of the research that he's done on wearable devices and sensors and those kinds of things. We're doing a time check here. What we would like to do instead, and I don't know if you saw me and Brian Norris over here doing the kind of thing, we commit to you that we will organize a day-long brainstorming session sometime here in the near future to talk about wearable devices, sensors, those kinds of things, and how they will transform the healthcare space. So I'm also hoping that we can lure Dave back down. He does have friends here in Indianapolis. We've all learned that now. So maybe we can lure him back down. I think that there's a lot of other people that would want to be engaged in that kind of conversation. So we'll try to get that information out to you. But I wanted to thank you so much for coming down. Literally, this was like a less than 10-day kind of turnaround of me reaching out to some friends, and they said, yeah, we got some Google classes, and then he popped up. So thank you so much for coming down, short notice, especially, it was like right around 4th of July we were talking, so that's all good. A round of applause for Dave, please. And you are going to stick around for a while.